My friends, this city understands moments, and right now, this is one of them. Brandon Graham didn't come back for nostalgia, and he didn't come back to protect a perfect ending. He came back because championships are what last in Philadelphia, and in his own words, this team has a real shot at another one. 2.5 months after retiring on top, after celebrating a second Super Bowl on Broad Street, Graham chose to reopen the book because opportunities like this don't come around often. He's lived every version of Eagles football over 16 seasons, from the 4-12 lows in 2012 to playoff heartbreaks, to what he calls the golden era of this franchise. Walking away when the organization is at its best wasn't an option for him. Not when the road leads back to the art museum steps and starts right now, in front of the best fans in the world. That message hits differently when you look at where this team actually stands, heading into this wildcard matchup with the San Francisco 49ers. This isn't about hype, it's about reality. The Eagles are entering playoff football with real momentum, real belief inside the locker room, and a roster that is trending in the right direction at exactly the right time. You can feel it in how players are talking, how practices have gone, and how injuries are lining up as Sunday approaches. Lane Johnson is the biggest storyline up front. After suffering a foot injury back on November 16th against the Detroit Lions, he didn't practice for the final 7 regular season games. Now, for the first time since then, he's back on the field. Limited participation all week, officially listed as questionable, but present. And anyone who understands this team knows what his presence means. Nick Sirianni didn't dance around it. When Lane Johnson is on the field, everybody feels better. He's grinding, he's fighting, and he's doing everything possible to be there. In playoff football, that matters. Nakobe Dean is another massive piece falling back into place. After missing the final 2 regular season games with a hamstring injury, he was a full participant in practice on Friday and is good to go. His mindset says everything about where this team is mentally. Playoff football is faster, sharper, and teams don't beat themselves. You have to go take it. That's the tone coming out of the locker room. The injury report overall tells a story Eagles fans should pay attention to. Brett Toth is questionable as he continues through the concussion protocol after limited participation. Azeez Ojulari's practice window is open after being on injured reserve since November 1st with a hamstring injury. He was a full participant all week, but remains questionable because he would need to be activated to play. Landon Dickerson was rested Thursday and fully back Friday, which is standard this time of year. Yolan Carter, Marcus Epps, Dallas Goedert, and Yellen Phillips were among the players rested in Week 18 due to injury concerns, and all are good to go now. That's not small. That's core talent across multiple position groups entering the postseason healthy. On the other side, the 49ers are dealing with their own questions, and they are not insignificant. Trent Williams is questionable with a hamstring injury. He returned to practice in a limited capacity, but his availability matters more than almost anyone else on that roster. San Francisco's record without him speaks for itself. Ricky Pearsall, their top wide receiver and a 2024 first-round pick, is also questionable after missing the Week 18 game with knee and ankle injuries and not practicing all week. Despite only playing 9 games this season, he led the 49ers in targets, receptions, and receiving yards on throws of 20-plus air yards, which shows exactly how important he is to their offense. The 49ers linebacker situation is thin. Tatum Bethune is out for the year. Fred Warner and Nick Martin are already on injured reserve and not ready to return. Dee Winters and Luke Gifford are both questionable after missing practice with ankle and quadriceps injuries. Renardo Green, a starting cornerback, was added late to the injury report with an ankle issue. This is not ideal depth heading into a playoff game against an Eagles offense that can stress you horizontally and vertically. All of this circles back to what Brandon Graham was really saying. This is about opportunity. This is about timing. This is about a team that believes it's built for moments like this, supported by a fan base that turns the Link into something no other stadium in the league can match. No matter the weather, you see the tailgates, you feel the electricity. The players feel it too. The biggest moments are here, and the road starts now. So, when you look at this matchup, the health trends, the mindset inside the locker room, and the urgency in Graham's words. How confident are you in this Eagles team heading into Sunday, and why? What makes this moment different is not just who is available, but how the entire picture comes together when you slow it down. Playoff football is rarely clean, rarely perfect, and almost never decided by one star player alone. It's decided by margins, by who can withstand pressure when the game tightens and every snap carries weight. That's why the Eagles' situation heading into this game feels so real. Not fragile, not inflated. The roster isn't perfect, but it's aligned. Lane Johnson being questionable instead of ruled out completely already changes how San Francisco has to prepare. Even the possibility of him playing forces defensive coordinators to rethink matchups and pressures. That's the value of elite players in January. They don't just block defenders, they occupy minds. And even if he's not at full strength, the leadership and stability he brings to the offensive line ripple through the entire unit. That matters when the game speeds up. Nakobe Dean returning fully is another under-the-radar shift that could show up in crucial moments. Linebackers see everything before the snap. They communicate, adjust, erase mistakes before they happen. Against an offense that wants to stress, discipline, and timing, having a linebacker who understands leverage, spacing, and responsibility is huge. This is the kind of return that doesn't dominate headlines, but shows up on third downs, red zone snaps, and late game stops. The same applies to players like Dallas Goedert and Yolan Carter being good to go. Goedert changes how defenses cover the middle of the field. Carter changes how offenses block on early downs. Those are not replaceable roles. They tilt the field subtly, possession by possession. And when you stack that with Marcus Epps stabilizing the back end of the defense after Andrew Mukuba's injury, you start to see why the Eagles feel structurally sound going into this matchup. Now look again at the 49ers side without emotion, just facts. Trent Williams is trying to fight through a hamstring injury. Ricky Persol hasn't practiced. Their linebacker depth is stretched thin, and they're already without cornerstone players who aren't coming back. That doesn't mean they're weak. It means they're vulnerable in specific areas, and playoff games are often decided by which vulnerabilities get exposed first. This is where Brandon Graham's words carry extra weight. He's been through seasons where opportunities slipped away, where teams weren't ready, where timing was wrong. That's why he talks about moments, not narratives. He understands that nobody remembers how your career ends if it doesn't end with something meaningful. Championships are the currency in this city. That's the standard. And he wouldn't be here if he didn't believe this roster could meet it.
The road starting Sunday isn't symbolic. It's literal. One game. No margin for error. No reset button. Everything the Eagles have managed physically and mentally over the last few weeks funnels into these 60 minutes. The energy of the crowd, the health trends, the urgency inside the locker room, it all converges here. This is why the stakes feel heavier than a normal wild card game. It feels like a test of belief as much as execution. Belief that this roster is deep enough, healthy enough, and focused enough to take advantage of the opportunity in front of it. Belief that the golden era Brandon Graham talks about isn't behind them, but still unfolding. What often gets overlooked in games like this is how experience shows up when things stop going according to plan. That's where this Eagles roster quietly separates itself. Brandon Graham isn't just a feel-good story. He's a living reference point inside that locker room. He's played in seasons where the crowd was restless, seasons where expectations crushed teams, and seasons where everything finally aligned. When he talks about moments, younger players listen because he's lived both sides of them. That perspective matters when a drive stalls, when a call doesn't go your way, or when the opponent punches first. Playoff games almost always include that moment where doubt tries to creep in. The teams that survive it are the ones anchored by players who understand that 60 minutes don't define themselves in the first quarter. That's where Graham, Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce's legacy still echoing through the building, and veterans across the roster shape the response. This is also why the injury situation feels more like management than panic. The Eagles didn't rush Lane Johnson back from meaningless snaps. They didn't force Nakobe Dean onto the field before he was ready. They accepted short-term discomfort for long-term readiness. Now, entering the postseason, they aren't scrambling to patch holes. They're deciding how to deploy pieces. That distinction is enormous in January. From a tactical standpoint, having multiple players listed as questionable but practicing changes how opponents prepare. You don't know what personnel groupings you'll see. You don't know which matchups will be available snap to snap. That uncertainty favors the team that can do more, not the team hoping one player returns to save them. The Eagles are operating from a position of options. And when you zoom out, that aligns perfectly with Graham's message. He didn't come back because of nostalgia or unfinished business. He came back because he saw a real window, not a hypothetical one. A tangible one built on roster health, depth, and belief. That kind of clarity doesn't exist on every playoff team. Some squads are just happy to be here. Others are holding on. This Eagles team sounds like it knows exactly why it's here. Sunday won't be about speeches anymore. It'll be about whether the preparation, patience, and timing translate when the game tightens. But the foundation is there. The energy of the crowd is real. The health trends are real. The urgency inside the locker room is real. And the opportunity Brandon Graham talked about is sitting right in front of them. When you strip everything down, what's left is trust. Trust built over a season of managing adversity without panic. Trust in preparation that didn't chase headlines but focused on timing. Trust that when the lights get brighter, the structure of this team won't crack. That's the real undercurrent here, and it's why Brandon Graham's decision resonates so deeply. He recognized trust when he saw it. He recognized a locker room that knows what it's doing. This is also where the Eagles' identity quietly reasserts itself. Not flashy declarations, not guarantees, but an understanding that playoff football is earned snap by snap. The Eagles aren't entering this game pretending to be unbeatable. They're entering it prepared to be tested. That distinction matters. Teams that think they're supposed to win often struggle when the game doesn't follow the script. Teams that expect resistance usually respond better when it shows up. Every detail over the past week points to that mindset. Limited practices where needed. Rest where it made sense. Full participation when it mattered. Players returning at the right moment instead of the earliest possible one. That's not coincidence. That's discipline. And discipline is usually what survives longest in January. The 49ers will bring talent, aggression, and their own sense of urgency. This won't be easy, and nobody inside the Eagles building believes it will be. But belief doesn't come from ignoring risk. It comes from understanding it and preparing anyway. That's exactly what this week has looked like. So as Sunday approaches, this game stops being about hypotheticals and starts being about execution. About whether the Eagles can turn health into leverage, experience into calm, and opportunity into action. That's the question hanging over this moment. Not whether they want it, not whether they believe, but whether they can impose that belief when everything is on the line. At this point, the conversation shifts from anticipation to accountability. Everything that could be controlled has been managed. Everything that could be prepared has been addressed. What remains is execution under pressure, and that's where teams reveal who they really are. The Eagles aren't walking into this moment blind. They've seen what works, what breaks, and what needs to be steady when the margin disappears. This is where the collective nature of this roster becomes critical. It's not just about the stars who return to the field or the veterans whose voices carry weight. It's about how the entire unit responds when a single snap can flip momentum. Offensive linemen trusting the man next to them. Defenders communicating when fatigue sets in. Coaches staying disciplined when temptation to overcorrect creeps in. These are the details that decide playoff games long before the final score does. Brandon Graham's presence is symbolic, but it's also practical. He understands that legacy isn't built on comfort. It's built on risk, on choosing the hard road when the easy ending is already secured. That mentality doesn't stay isolated. It spreads. Younger players see it. Teammates feel it. And when the game tightens, those shared standards become anchors. The Eagles don't need perfection to move forward. They need composure. They need clarity. They need to trust that the work done over months matters more than the noise that surrounds one afternoon. That's the real test now. Not whether this team can make big plays, but whether it can stay connected when adversity hits. Everything circles back to that simple idea of opportunity. You don't get many chances like this. Healthy at the right time. Focused at the right moment, supported by a fan base that understands exactly what's at stake. This is why Brandon Graham came back. This is why the locker room believes. And this is why this game feels heavier than a normal wild card matchup. What makes this stretch so compelling is that there's no hiding anymore. The preparation phase is over, the injury reports are finalized, and the tone inside the building has already been set. From here on, everything becomes visible. Every adjustment, every substitution, every response to momentum swings will tell the story of who this team really is when the season is on the line. This is where the Eagles' internal confidence matters more than outside expectations. They're not chasing validation. They're chasing execution. Players know exactly why certain decisions were made over the past weeks, why rest mattered, why patience mattered, and why timing mattered more than optics. When you hear Brandon Graham talk about moments, he's not speaking emotionally. He's speaking structurally. He understands that championships are built when preparation meets opportunity, not when noise meets urgency. The locker room understands that this isn't about proving anything to anyone else. It's about honoring the work already done, about turning belief into discipline and discipline into consistency. Playoff games don't reward teams that want it more. They reward teams that stay connected when chaos hits. That's the real separator, and it's the quiet question hovering over this matchup. For the Eagles, the path forward doesn't require reinvention. It requires trust. Trust in the plan. Trust in each other. Trust that when adversity shows up, the response will be calm instead of frantic. That's what veteran presence gives you. That's what experience buys you. And that's why this moment feels earned, not accidental. Everything now funnels into one reality. 60 minutes where every decision matters. 60 minutes